Heyo, it's OmniDog. Struggling with his microphone. How's it going, OmniDogs and OmniKittens? Recently, somebody said, Jess, what are your top 10 books? And I thought to myself, can I get it down to 10? And I decided I would give it a shot. So, these are my favorite 10 books. Now, they won't necessarily line up with your favorite 10 books. That's because these are my favorite 10 books. And I based it on what do I go back the most to reread? What books do I get the most enjoyment out of? What do I pick up new things every time I go back to reread them? That's how I based what my favorites were on, what I just always go back, still get enjoyment out of. Just because I don't have it in my top list doesn't mean it's not a good book. Usagi Yojimbo is not going to be in my list because I haven't finished the whole series yet. That could be something that I go back to. Dark Knight Returns is not in my top list, although that was a game changer of a book. I've talked about it a lot before, but it's not going to be in my list because I don't go back that often to reread it. So your favorite book may not be included in mine, but that's what makes the world go round. And as usual, I have my frost top because this is a root beer review, and I'm still on a diet, so I'm still taking little sips. This jug's gonna last a while. And I'm looking at a book that I should have included in my top 10. Darn it. Oh well, I've made my choices and I have to stick with them. So, of course, I couldn't get it down to 10. I cheated. I made it 11. And these are not in any particular order. They are in the order that I pull them off the stack. So these are my top 11 books. And the first one that is a kind of recent discovery for me, maybe within the past year, is Lady Mechanika. I love this book. It's about a woman who gets put back together in back in the turn of the century Victorian England steampunk adventure by Joe Benitez. Um, the art is incredible and the writing is really, really good on this book. I love this book. She's got cyborg eyes and some cyborg limbs, and she's out to find the man that did it to her. All along the while in flying steamships, she solves mysteries and crimes. I just go back to this book all the time in the past year and have reread it, and I enjoy the heck out of it. As far as I can tell, there are three volumes with another skinny volume that follows. And there's two hardcovers right now, volumes one and two. Benitez Productions. This guy does it all himself, which is amazing when you think about it. Um, Love this book, Lady Mechanika. I highly recommend it. Now, the next book, there are tons of choices you can make for Superman. Superman American Alien, I felt bad not including it because I love that book. That is such a great book. And All Star Superman. I have gone back and reread that a lot. Um, but no book had the emotional impact on me. And it may be because I so identify with the Silver Age, and it was a brand new beginning for Superman, and that would be Alan Moore and Kurt Swan's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I go back to this book all the time and read it, and it is just such a great book. I can see why it was so popular. I can see it has definitely withstood the test of time. They had Alan Moore go back, not go back, but I think it was originally published in 85 and 86. They had Alan Moore go in and get rid of all the Silver Age trappings of Superman and kind of kill him off so they could start a more modern era Superman. And this book, it still always surprises me First of all, just this great Kurt Swan art is always spectacular. The storyline covers all the bases. Legion of Superheroes, Bizarro, Crypto, Supergirl, Lana Lang, Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane. It covers all the bases of the Silver Age, takes what was good about the Silver Age, makes them into a really good modern story, and sets the way forward for a new Superman. Now, you could say, but Jess, it's not as deep or emotionally impacting as All Star Superman, and it's not as varied as, say, American Alien. Good points. I just go back to this book all the time to read it. I get a kick out of it. It's one of my favorites. So it made the top 10, 11. This book got me into more Marvel and more X-Men than any other book. And I go back as often as I can to page through it and reread it. It hasn't been out in super collected form for that long, but it made me Grant Morrison's new X-Men. It made me fall in love with Emma Frost and the Stepford Cuckoos. What great characters. It's got fantastic art. I am a huge fan of the art in this book. Most of it's Frank Quitely, although I don't know that this part is right here. But it introduces a ton of characters and a ton of concepts. And as a new X-Men reader, I loved this book, and it's not hard to get into right off the bat. It's not hard for somebody that hasn't read X-Men before to get into. I just was amazed by this book, and it made me fall in love with Emma Frost, and it made me, love the Stepford Cuckoos, which were great inventive characters. But there's a ton of other great characters and storylines and plot lines that get introduced in this book. Actually, I'm not seeing. Okay, some of the second part of this is Frank Quitely. There is just, it's an amazing, amazing book. Those of you out there who are X-Men fans may say it's not even the best X-Men book. Hey, I don't know. It's my favorite X-Men book, and it's one of my favorite comics. New X-Men by Grant Morrison. I dig it. This next one, I don't really need to say much about. I was around getting it in floppy form when it came out in the mid-'80s. It changed comic books along with Dark Knight. I go back to it frequently and am amazed at the new things I pick up. I don't really need to say much to it because it's one of the most republished books. Books have been written about it. Classes have been taught about it. DC has reprinted it in 15 or 16 different formats. Watchmen. I go back to this a lot and reread this a lot. And people are... there's probably going to be no argument that it's in my top 10. I remember picking it up in floppies and reading it and just being amazed at it. And it continues to be amazing. I think it reads better collected, and DC's put it out in, Watchmen Black and White, Watchmen Collected, Absolute Watchmen, Deluxe Edition, 15 years later, whatever. They've milked the heck out of it. I still haven't seen the movie. I know I need to see it. I want to see the director's cut, which is like 5 hours long. Groundbreaking. I don't really need to say that much about it. You guys all know about it. But this is definitely one of my tops. The next book is a recent book that has come out, and I'm going to do a whole separate video on this because I think it deserves more attention than it's getting. It may be popular for all I know, but I think it was a little bit controversial because it was the replacement of probably the most favoritist X-Men, if I can invent a word there, or butcher the English language. Um, but all new Wolverine. Yeah, I know what you're saying, Jess. It's not even Wolverine. I think it is Wolverine. It's the all new Wolverine. It's Laura X-23 as Wolverine, and this book is a flat out blast. It's got a couple of her clones. It's got a badger in it, or not a badger. Is It's like a Wolverine or something. The pet of Gabby. Gabby is her little clone, Laura's little clone, and she has the best lines in the book. The book is constantly funny, constantly amusing, constantly interesting. Tom Taylor is a great writer. That's all I can say. The art is strong throughout all 6 volumes, and it made me actually not hate Daken. I hated that guy, Wolverine's son. It actually makes him interesting, and there's the badger. Maybe it's a honey badger. Um, it makes the book interest. Daken was made interesting and reasonably likable. I hated that character for the longest time, and this book just delivers consistently, never lets down in any of the volumes. It is exactly what I want in a comic book. Fun, exciting to read. Can't wait for the next issue. If this comes out in omnibus form, I usually don't. I'm not a guy that upgrades. I would totally upgrade all 6 of these into an omnibus. Marvel, make this an omnibus. I love All New Wolverine enough that it became one of my faves in my top 10, quote, 11, unquote. Um, I highly, highly recommend All New Wolverine. This next book also won't be a surprise to anybody because it's gotten accolades from the first issue. Um, it's another book that was a bit of a game changer, groundbreaker. It's where Neil Gaiman first got really famous. I remember standing in line when he first came to a local con here in Virginia, and they got Neil Gaiman. I'm like, oh, hey, that's the Sandman guy. I should get his autograph on a book. I didn't have anything. He was patiently signing autographs. Now, of course, you'd have to open up a whole convention center for an appearance by him. And, of course, I stupidly did not get his autograph. And I'm talking about, of course, Sandman. Everybody talks about this, knows this book extremely well. So there's not much I can do to tell you how great it is. You probably already know. But this is a book I definitely get something new out of every time. I need to do a read through of it again. This would be my 5th or 6th time reading through it. And I it's just I can't wait for the third omnibus to come out so I can have 3 omnis. It's in 5 really nice absolutes. Um, but this is a book that I one of those things where I thought DC, good on you guys for even publishing this, because the first 5 issues are kind of grisly and nightmarish, and then it just blossoms into this amazing world. You guys already know all about Sandman. I don't need to wax on about it, but yeah, definitely Sandman. If you haven't read it, you need to. This and omnibus or absolute form, whichever is your preferred format. It's got great art, so absolute would be a good way to go. Uh, but this really opened my eyes to what comic books can do. Just brilliant stuff. The next book is a more recent book also, but I have reread this and reread this, and I still get something out of it. It's an ongoing book, so there's still more story to tell. It's by one of my favorite writers, Greg Rucka, and the world building he does in this book is incredible. I'm talking about Lazarus. This is one of my top 10 books, and the world building he does in this book is simply breathtaking. He has researched and designed things like the posters on the wall and the bumper stickers and the danger signs in a room. There's there's no detail he hasn't missed in creating this amazing world where all the families, the world's been divided up into these families, and they each have this Lazarus that is a highly trained assassin to guard the family interests. And this is the story about this one family's Lazarus and what she goes through being a Lazarus, um, what how she was made, how she was trained, how she identifies with the other Lazaruses in the other families, the conflict that's ongoing between the families, and what the world's like in this kind of post-apocalyptic scenario where there's an economic collapse and businesses take over. It's just incredible, and I can't say enough about Lazarus book 1 and 2, and I'm excited for where this book goes on from here. um, Lazarus. This next book will be no surprise to anybody that knows me or has even seen one of my videos. I talk about it all the time as my favorite book ever, my favorite comic book ever. Excuse me, I am getting thirsty, so I have to have some Frost Top. That's good stuff. But this book, I made a video on it saying why I thought it was the best comic book ever. Irredeemable. If you haven't read it or haven't seen one of my vids about it, Irredeemable is the story of what happens if Superman existed and he went bad. He went selfish. He took pleasure in hurting and killing and stealing and robbing and doing whatever the hell he wanted. And the efforts of his sort of Justice League that are around him to try and rein him in. There's a character in it, Cubit. This is really kind of Cubit's book. The Plutonian is this guy's name that's irredeemable. But it's Cubit that really kind of steals the show because he's tasked with stopping the Plutonian, or Tony as he's known. And if check out my video review of it where I claim it's the best book ever. You may disagree. That's cool. I get a huge amount of pleasure from reading and rereading Irredeemable. I love this book with all my heart. Irredeemable. I mean it. Now here's a book that is in absolute form, but I remember in my teenage years picking it up off of the spinner rack in a drugstore. Yep, that's right. That's how we used to buy books, for 15 cents or something. And I was stunned at the artwork, stunned at the story. It was probably the very first time, not the very first time, but it made a big impact in comics having a social conscience. And the way it was drawn, the way it was written was groundbreaking back in the early to mid 70s. And that's Green Lantern, Green Arrow, starting with Green Lantern 76, 15 cents right there. When I saw that, I thought, who does Green Arrow think he is, shattering Hal's battery? And how exactly does Hal's battery shatter? Well, it's got classic Neil Adams art with Dick Giordano on inks, and great coloring, and Dennis O'Neil writing some of the most powerful stuff I had ever read at that time. It completely blew me away, and it was some kind of different story. It dealt with drug use and racism, the cluelessness of some superheroes as to conditions on Earth because they're too busy patrolling the galaxy. That's Green Lantern. Green Arrow is his Jiminy Cricket, and gives him a conscience. It's got Black Canary in there, where she's pretty much a badass, as she should be. This, I probably don't need to tell you just how great this book is. It's historical. I've got it in absolute format where the art really shines, and it's the original stuff. Neil Adams did not go in and re-ink this stuff. This is very close and near and dear to me because it changed the way I read comics. So we're down to two. It's not definitely not the top two, but two more of my favorites. And this may surprise you, but I go back to this book all the time to reread it because it it still is a surprise to me every time I read it. The direction it takes. It's got great writing and Alex Ross art, and that is absolute justice. Uh, the art is crazy. You can pick up this book just for the art alone, and you'll love it. Um, but the story is really well written, really well set up, um, and because I have such a bad memory, I kind of always forget where the story leads. So it's always kind of a new and interesting book for me every time I read it because I do have such a bad memory. Jim Kruger and Alex Ross did the story. Jim Kruger did the script, and it's got Doug Braithwaite and Alex Ross on the art. Um, you and the book I looked at and said, "Oh shoot, I should have included it," is Marvels, where I really saw Alex Ross art, Kurt Busiek's writing. I saw Alex Ross's art for the first time. Marvels is a fabulous book, and if I had time, I would have got it down. But it's the gigantic edition of Marvels that I have, and I'd be afraid that I'd knock everything over with it. It's so big, but I highly recommend Marvels also, as well as Justice. Absolute Justice. You should get it in absolute format because this art deserves it. And the story is really, really good. I go back to this at least once a year and read it, sometimes a couple times a year, and just am in awe of how great the art and story is. And last but not least, where would a Jess Omnidog list be without my gal, the great Harley Quinn? Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner rewrote and rebooted sort of Harley Quinn into, instead of being the Joker's punching bag, her own badass character where she is constantly breaking the fourth wall but having a blast doing it. Now, I know there's some people out there who say she's just DC's Deadpool. Whatever. You can think that. I don't care. I love this book, and I've loved. This is the book that made me fall in love with Harley Quinn. Made me obsessed with Harley Quinn. I have Harley everything. I love the books. I love the pops. I love the statues. I love everything about her. The art in this book is great, and the writing is just funny, and I just love Harley Quinn. I love this book and love every I really love what Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner did with the character. They made her own person. They made her take charge. She is just completely rewritten, and now I'm not saying Paul Dini didn't create a great character. He did. He's the iconic and great writer of an inventor, creator of Harley Quinn. So, not saying anything against his Harley Quinn. I'm just saying that Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner's Harley Quinn is an absolute blast for me to read. I love this book, and I reread it all the time. And I read the Rebirth stuff and really liked it too. So there you have it. Those are my top books. Leave comments as to what your top books are. That'd be fun to compare lists. And I'm not saying these are the best books out there. I'm just saying these are my favorites. And those are my favorite 10, 11 books. And I hope you got something out of this. Maybe you'll take a look at my books and want to read some of what I suggested. I hope so. I hope you had a good time watching. And with that, I will see you on the next video. Peace and love. Peace and love.